Hey everybody, Tomas the Tobacconist here at Ultimo Premium Cigars, and I'm back at you with another video on how premium cigars are made. Today we're going to cover the wrapping process. In our last video, we went through the process of the bunching methods, the various techniques that are involved in making premium hand-rolled cigars to make it to where it draws well and is constructed well. Now we want to make the cigar beautiful, and that's going to come from the wrapper leaf. Now there's different types of wrapper leaf, and I'll give you a couple of examples here. Here we have a candela. Candela is quick cured at a high temperature to lock in the green coloration to ensure that it has a nice green color as well as a little bit of a sweet grassy flavor to it. And then from there, we're going to go into a Connecticut wrapper. Sometimes you'll see Connecticut wrappers used in a barber pole like this one here, where you have a contrast of the Connecticut, which is the lighter shade, and the Maduro, which is a darker shade. So you get a nice barber pole effect here. Now, ideally, in a barber pole cigar like this, each of these wrappers is going to contribute to the flavor profile of the cigar. So a Connecticut will be the nice, light, kind of toasty nuttiness in the cigar, whereas a Maduro, in this case, is going to give you a little bit more of a rich, earthy, chocolatey flavor profile. In the middle of those two, we're going to go into the Habano wrapper. The Habano is going to be a nice medium brown, a little bit more of a toasty, cedary note to that tobacco, depending on the origin and so forth. And then, of course, the darkest is going to be your Maduros and your Oscuros. So a Maduro tobacco or Oscuro tobacco, which is the darker colorations, will have to go through a secondary process. Now, in most cases, a tobacco is going to go from the field. Usually for wrapper leaf is going to be the volados and the secos, which is the lower portion of the tobacco plant. That's going to give you a nice thin leaf and give you a good stretch to the leaf. But when we get into the darker Maduros, it's going to go from growing on the plant to then going into a pilon. And usually we're going into some of the thicker breeds of plant, or a thicker leaf on the plant itself, usually secos or visos. And these leaves are going to have to be a little bit more hardy to be able to sustain the additional aging process that can last anywhere from 2 to 4 years to get this natural dark coloration. A natural dark Maduro is going to go into what's called a pilon. The pilon is a pylon. It's a large pile of leaf that is organized in a very specific way to allow for the tobacco to, under its own weight, bring sugars to the surface and compress while it's going through a fermentation process. As it goes through that fermentation, it's releasing heat. And there's a large probe thermometer in the middle of that pilon. It's telling the manufacturer the temperature in the center of that pilon. Once it achieves their preferred temperature, which in many cases is 120 degrees Celsius, then at that point they're going to disassemble that pilon and they're going to reassemble it in a different order, allowing the center or different tobaccos in the center to be able to be exposed to that heat. And that's going to bring all the sugars out. That's going to help to protect the leaf while it's going through a further breaking down of the sugars to get that nice darker coloration. So you have your candelas, your Connecticut's. In the middle between Habano, you got your Colorados, Maduros, and Oscuros. So you got that different gradation in terms of color, from the natural green color all the way to a dark brown color. Sometimes you'll see cigars in a box that has dark, inky, oily, black coloration, or you'll see videos of people with their hands all black while they're rolling cigars and stuff. And a lot of times those tobaccos will go through a secondary processing where they're going to add caramel color and things like that for even consistent coloration. There's a process called Bethune where they'll boil tobaccos for your wrapper leaf that have sometimes they'll add cinnamon or spices or citrus or different flavors to be able to give you a little bit of a flavor influence into the wrapper leaf. Now we talk about how the influence of the wrapper leaf changes the flavor. That's going to vary based off of the size and shape of the cigar as well as the wrapper leaf itself. As you can imagine, a thin, light, say Connecticut wrapper leaf on a larger 60 ring gauge cigar, kind of like this size cigar here, is going to have less influence if you were to put that same wrapper leaf on a cigar that is this size, because now you're looking at different consistency in terms of the ratios of leaf. And so the ratio here, you're going to have a lot more filler leaf, whereas here you're going to have a lot less filler leaf. So that's going to determine how much influence the wrapper leaf gives to the cigar. And so, again, this is a Candela wrapper, which is a little bit lighter, grassier. And this is a Maduro, which is a little bit heavier, spicier, a little bit more dark chocolate flavors to it. So that's going to have more influence on the flavor than a light, thin Candela leaf would in the particular situation here. So when we look at the wrapper leaf, it's going to be your most premium leaf and the most expensive leaf. And that's because this leaf has to have a nice even coloration and without any blemishing, sun spotting, or water staining. So it's usually grown under cheesecloth and requires the most maintenance of the tobaccos. So it's going to be a nice thin leaf. Usually it takes about 4 to 6 days of prep to get this leaf to a nice consistency of stretch to be able to roll into a cigar. So when you take that leaf, you wrap it around a cigar, you're going to look at different veins and the orientation of the leaf. As we lay the tobacco down onto the board, we go to trim the leaf. We're going to make sure that the orientation of the leaf is going to be specific to where when we layer that leaf over itself, it's continuing to roll the vein parallel to the body of the cigar. And then once we get to the end of that, we're going to add a little bit of our cigar glue. In our factory, we use Bermacol. Some use pectin and dextrose and different fruit gums and things like that. And so we're using Bermacol. So we apply a little bit of Bermacol at the end. And at this point, we determine if we're going to go with a single, double, or triple cap. Now, a lot of people have different ideas of what the cap indicates or how to identify the cap of a cigar. In our case, some cigars will use a double cap. Some cigars will use a triple cap, and some cigars we use a single cap where we just do a pigtail because that's kind of more rapid for us. So what we look at is how is it affecting the quality of the smoking experience. We look at the price point of the cigar and the amount of labor that goes into it and the speed of efficiency in terms of the manufacturing processes. So in our situation here, we're looking at all these different variables to make a determination whether the cigar requires a single, double, or triple cap. Whereas in some manufacturers, they look at tradition, or some places say, okay, well, for example, Cuba, it's traditional to do a triple cap in most of the cigars in Cuba, whereas in Dominican Republic, you see a lot more frequent use of a single cap. In Nicaragua and Honduras, you see primarily, you'll see usage of a double cap, but it doesn't necessarily require that these different methods are used in these countries of origin. You see a lot of variation from one manufacturer to the next, or even within the same manufacturers, depending on the price point of the cigar and so on. And the way we identify that is sometimes you'll hear, look at the number of stripes or layering at the cap of the cigar, and that can be an indicator of how many times a flag has been wrapped around the cigar. Now, when we look at the term cap, it doesn't necessarily mean just the end of the cigar. In Spanish, capa, the cap is the whole wrapper leaf. So when you wrap the cigar the first time, the primary wrapper leaf is going to be your first cap. Then from there, if you choose to do a flag, a separate piece to wrap around, that would be considered a second cap. And if you choose to do a third piece at the very end, which is your final cap, that would be your third cap. So you got first, second, and third. That's where you have a triple cap, as opposed to in some manufacturers, what they'll do is they'll take that wrapper leaf, wrap it around on itself, and then they'll cut the flag, extending out of the wrapper leaf, and then wrap that around on itself. So that's all part of the first cap. And then from there, they cut a small circle and put that at the very end, and that's going to be your second cap. Now, if it was a single cap, what they would do is just cut a circle and then fold it around on itself. So a good way to tell if it is a single cap is, one, if this seam line kind of curves into itself and then wraps around, that's telling you that's all one piece that's wrapping around to create your flag. And then you'll see around the end cap, only about 2/3 of the way you'll see a line around, because they're taking that extra piece and flipping around on itself, so the line won't come all the way around because it's not a separate piece. That's a single cap. You'll notice that on Davidoff, for example. Whereas a double cap is going to have, usually you'll see a flag, the seam comes around, curves around on itself, and then comes around the cigar. But then you'll see a separate piece all the way around for your final cap. Now, a triple cap, oftentimes, you'll see where the wrapper leaf comes up, the seam terminates as it is overlapped entirely by a separate piece. So it just goes straight in to that separate piece. That separate flag comes all the way around and then terminates underneath the final cap. And then the final cap is a separate third piece all the way around, and that's going to be your triple cap. So these are some of the ways you can kind of identify whether it's a single, double, or triple cap cigar. And in terms of how you experience those cigars, they're going to be all pretty consistent in terms of how they're going to smoke and whether they're going to fall apart while you smoke them. The key thing is how you cut the cigar, ensuring that you don't cut below the shoulder where the curve is. That's going to help to ensure that the cigar doesn't unravel, whether it's a single, double, or triple cap. If you cut too far down and you cut beyond the flag, if there is one, or beyond where the glue is, essentially, you can run the risk of the cigar unraveling while you smoke the cigar. So making sure that you cut the cigar properly is going to determine the quality of your experience, not necessarily the flag if the cigar is made well. So most premium cigars, of course, are made well. They use enough of the cigar glue and they're not going to fall apart, especially in modern cigars. So that's kind of an idea of how the tobacco is prepped, wrapped, and finished on a premium hand-rolled cigar. On our next video, we're going to go over the flavor development, the blending processes, as well as tasting and anatomy of taste. If you have any other videos you want to see or any questions about the cigar manufacturing process and how premium cigars are made, please feel free to drop a comment in the comment section, and please follow us on all of our socials at Ultimo Cigars. As always, thank you for all your support, and I look forward to seeing you again soon.